live. Are we ready to go, Shaykh? Yeah, we are. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. Thank you so much to everyone who has tuned in today. We're streaming on a number of different platforms. We are on Unity Family Services, iSyllabus, and we're also on my own page at Amer 786. So we'll start with a few introductions just for those of you who maybe are not aware. So my name is Amer, and I'm joined today by Shaykh Amer Jamil, and I'll just quickly run through. So Shaykh Amer Jamil has a law degree from Strathclyde University, also has an honours in Islamic Studies from the University of Wales. Shaykh Amer spent 10 years studying Islamic sciences, including 5 years with scholars in the Middle East, including Syria and Yemen, which also gained him teaching licenses, or as it's called, ijaza, in various Islamic sciences. So Shaykh Amer's main field of interest and his specialisation is in Islamic family law. Shaykh Amer is also the founder of Unity Family Services, which some of you may be watching on, and also co-founder of iSyllabus, which I think makes Shaykh Amer the perfect person to have this discussion with today. So as you can see, we're not in a normal studio setting. We've been very generously allowed to use Moss Coffee House, so thank you to the team at Moss Coffee House in Glasgow for letting us use their space. And the reason that we chose this was that we felt this particular discussion, although it's relevant to everybody in any setting, I wanted it to be more of a conversational, flowing discussion with Shaykh Amer. And the plan is that we'll have a wee bit of an engaging conversation. We'll go through the different types of disputes. We'll hopefully gain some practical tips and hints from Shaykh Amer. And then at the end, there are some questions that have already been given to me. And if anyone else has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. So a bit of personal reflection on why this topic came up. And I think that anyone who's watching, if they're, I don't even think it's about honesty, but anybody who's watching will at some point in their life have come up against sort of disputes with people in various types of relationships, whether it's parents, whether it's siblings, whether it's husband, wife, uncles, aunties, it doesn't matter. We always as humans have personalities, we have different ways of behaving, reacting to things, and I think for me personally, one of the things I've been trying to do is proactively ask myself what is the prophetic way to deal with these types of disputes, because I don't believe that at the time of the Prophet ﷺ that they didn't have these types of disputes, and so I guess that's where this kind of discussion came from. So to open us up this evening, I'd like to ask Shaykh Amer just to give us some kind of opening comments on the topic that we're going to be discussing this evening, and again from an Islamic perspective, why it's important for us to have these types of discussions. So Shaykh, over to you.
Yeah, so alhamdulillah, I think the topic touches most of us, because we all nobody lives in a perfect world. No one's got a perfect marriage, no one's got a perfect family. Everyone has their issues to a larger or lesser extent. I think from our Islamic paradigm, the topic is extremely important. Why is it extremely important? Because the emphasis that the Prophet ﷺ placed on it. So this idea of maintaining family ties is extremely important, and in many hadith it comes up, whoever believes in Allah and the last day, when kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir falyasil rahimah, that they should maintain family ties. If you believe in Allah, believe in the last day, you should maintain family ties. Somebody who doesn't maintain family ties, the opposite, who breaks them, doesn't enter paradise. La yadkhul jannah qati'. So because of the emphasis that we have on this topic, it's extremely important, and it's also one of the areas, because obviously I'm in this field of marriage and family, an area that people struggle with. So sometimes I'm not surprised now, but I used to be surprised that somebody you know, they're involved in maybe a really great community project. So they're doing a lot of community work, but their own personal life is a bit of a mess. Their own marriage is suffering, their own relationship with the children is a bit of a mess. And I think that we tend to not realise that it doesn't really matter as much how good you are out in society. It doesn't matter if you get OBE from the Queen. It doesn't matter if you're getting awards right, left and centre. If you cannot be a good human being to the people that matter the most, which is your spouse, your children, your parents, then you're not doing very well. Because in the next life, God's not going to be, if I take my own example, God's not going to ask me about the people I taught first or the community work I did. God will ask me first and foremost about how was I with my parents, how was I with my spouse, how was I with my children. These are my immediate responsibilities. Then when you get your home in order, you know, you start dealing with society. Like, as you know, neighbours have got a lot of significance in our religion, people who are close to you. So proximity, the closer people are to you, the more significant they are. Who are the people that inherit from you? It's the closest to you, and the people that inherit less are the, you know, a bit more extended. Similarly, zakat. Right? Who are the first people who deserve for you to give their zakat to? Family members, apart from your obviously parents, children, because they're dependents and that relationship. But in terms of say you had a poor brother, there's no point giving your zakat to Palestine if you've got a poor brother who's in need. So the zakat begins with the closest, and then it goes out and out and out. So many of our teachings are about dealing with it as priorities, and family's right up there. Your family life is up there in terms of priorities, in terms of what you need to focus on.
So it must be important then, Shaykh, to, as you said there, like, you know, we work in the community, both you and I, we've got, you know, various projects and things happening. What you're saying is, it sounds like we need to be really aware, we need to take time to regularly, you know, check ourselves and ask ourselves, are we giving enough time? Because it's very easy, from what I've experienced, to get sucked into a vacuum of being asked to go here or attend there or do this or do that, especially when you're kind of, you know, leading organisations. It must be very difficult. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that we have to remind ourselves that what you've just said there, which is the priority is always at home, and that
Absolutely.
that's where, when it comes to keeping your wife happy, when it comes to your children, we need to keep a balance.
The husband happy.
Or the husband happy. Yeah, absolutely. We need to keep that balance. And do you think that gets lost? I mean, you've got lots of clients, lots of people that you work with. You must. I mean, do you come across that? Is it happening more? Is it happening less? Are people self-aware? Are they not?
I think people just generally find family life difficult because, you know, as you know, when you get first married, it's a honeymoon period. You know, that's not a problem. The cracks tend to appear a few years into marriage, 5, 7 years, 10 years into marriage, because things are not going to. I mean, if you've got an old car, right, at the beginning you got a new car, you got no problem. You don't have to get your MOT done for how many years, I can't remember, right? But you know, it's brand new. Nothing's going to go wrong really, and you're surprised if it does go wrong, right? But once your car is 7, 8 years old, you need to, you know, start paying attention to it more. It requires more maintenance. Your life is like that as well, right? As you, for example, your health. As you grow older, you need to give it more and more priority than you did maybe when you were younger. And I think people lose that. They lose that fact that when it comes to marriage, unless you're injecting your time and energy into it, it's going to go stale. Unless you're putting your time and effort into building your relationship with your children, it will go stale. Right? Similarly with your parents. So I think that's number one. People take their eye off the ball. Number two is that, see, as human beings, our egos prefer things which are easy. So we like eating, we like drinking, we like sleeping, we like doing all the easy stuff. Even when it comes to studying, people like to hear stories, right? They like all the kind of light sciences. When it comes to heavy stuff, it's like, oh my god, this is heavy, it's hard. So as humans, we tend to shun that which is difficult. So I think one of the traps that people can fall into is that, see, it's fun doing
Yeah.
community work. It's fun, getting involved in a bazaar and
Yeah.
you're making cupcakes and selling and you're talking to people and you're having a laugh,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Whereas going home, you'll
Mm.
go home and your wife will have a list of DIY stuff for you
Yeah.
to do, and you go, oh my god, right? So it might be less adventurous stuff at
Yeah.
home, right? So it's easy for the human being to delude themselves by saying, I'm doing community work, I'm serving the community.
But
If you're serving,
yourself.
you're not serving your own family,
Mm.
then how are you serving the community? The
Yeah.
Prophet ﷺ, and there would have been nobody busier than the Prophet ﷺ. You can imagine, we think you've got difficulties, right? You can imagine what he went through. But we still have so many hadith
Yeah.
narrated by Aisha, this happened, that happened. He was spending time in home.
Mm.
He was spending time with his family. He was spending time with his children, with his wives,
Yeah.
right? So, irrespective of how busy he was, he would still give them their due,
Yeah.
and he give himself, his own due as well with his worship and so on. So you've always got to get the balance right, and then when you're looking at this balance, right, is you've got to always remember your family comes first. Family comes first, then it comes community. What happens is we flip it.
Mm.
We get so involved in community work that we neglect family, and it's a very easy cop out,
Yeah.
right? Rather than addressing the elephant in the room, it's easier to just go out with the boys and have a charity dinner,
Yeah.
right? Because it's great fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the ego likes that kind of stuff. And you can say to your wife, well, I'm working for the
Yeah.
community, but you have to keep your family happy
Yeah.
as well.
It's what I call Superman syndrome, is that sort of trying to go out there and kind of fool yourself that you're needed there more than you're needed at home. And I guess that's one of the challenges. One of the things I wanted to ask you, when we're talking about family ties, and you'd mentioned the verse that talks about, he who believes in Allah on the last day, when we're talking about family ties, how far and wide does that go in terms of, from an Islamic perspective? Do we talk about family, if we're defining it, is it the family in the walls of our home? Is it the family in the same city? Where does that kind of responsibility go? And I know today's day and age is slightly different now. Ironically, we do have ways of reaching out to family members, and there's really no excuse to not have that kind of relationship. But let's kind of ask ourselves, what does that kind of, how do we define family in that context?
See, the word aqriba in Arabic, which is translated as relatives, it comes from the word qareeb. Qareeb means to be near, right? So it's the nearest people to you, right? They have the most rights in you, and then the people that are next nearest have the next right, and so on. It's like that, and there's so many rules like that. Like inheritance is one of them. Another one would be like financial responsibility. Like whose financial responsibility is this poor relative? Well, it's the nearest, then it's the nearest, then it's the nearest, then it's the nearest. So it's always like that. So it's like, the rights that your spouse and your children have on you, it's not like the rights your uncle or your aunt has. They're not the same. Right. So even that has got priorities.
And if we're looking at, the next part that we're going to look at was discussing kind of the spiritual and communal benefits of reconciliation. So one of the things that I wanted to ask was, when we're looking at sort of prophetic examples, so at the time of the prophets, when they're looking at the story, for example, of Yusuf alayhi salam focusing on forgiveness, what do the prophets have, what should we be taking from the way that they navigated? Because as I said at the beginning there, there must be hadith, there must be stories, there must be narrations of disputes that took place at their time, and how did they navigate through them? What were their sort of ways of being, and how can we use that from their time and our time today?
I think the first thing is, obviously prophets are the best of humans, right? So we may not be able to emulate them 100%, but they're our role model. That's what we're trying to aspire to be like. So there's not going to be many people like Yusuf, where his own brothers tried to kill him,
Kill them.
who can then have that much character to just forgive them, right? So that is giving you the optimum way to
Yeah,
be.
yeah.
That's the optimum way to be, and that's what we aspire to be like. However, God is just as well, and if your relatives have been unjust to you, right? I don't know, maybe like taking your money or something like that, you have every right to ask for it back.
Yeah.
You have every right to feel upset that they've unjustly taken your money.
Mm.
So you can seek justice,
Mm.
right? You can seek justice, absolutely. That is your right. But to be able to forgive is a higher level than that. And I think also we see in the life of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the early Makkah period, what really, the way Abu Jahl, for example, was rejecting him, it wouldn't have felt the same as when Abu Lahab rejected him, because Abu Lahab's his uncle, right? And you expect more from your uncle. You're like, but you know me, you know who I am.
Yeah.
I've lived with you. You've visited me. Abu Jahl's a bit further away.
Yeah.
So the Prophet, this was heavy on his heart. When his own relatives were not listening to him, but he kept going back and back and back and back and back.
Mm.
He never gave up his effort. So we try our best, but at the same time, not everyone can be like Yusuf,
Yeah.
alayhi salam, and not every situation is the same, because not every heart's the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So there are some which are extremely deep
Mm.
wounds, and other things which are just kind of petty.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to kind of categorize, so for example, somebody who's been sexually abused by a relative, you can't expect them to forgive the same way someone, I don't know, ignored you or something at a wedding or something, or they, I don't know, they made something up, they made made some story up about you.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the same. So there's going to be variations between that.
Mm.
And so we're at this point in time talking about generally speaking, what is the general principle?
Yeah.
We're not talking about specifics.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right, and I think that's the next part where it talks about what we're going to talk about here is that, we know that in today's age that families are facing all sorts of different challenges, and you'll know through your work at Unity and some of the other work that you're doing in the community. One of the things I was thinking we could discuss was when we were looking at the situation of broken homes and divorces. So kind of what's your kind of guidance on preserving respect and communication when things like marriages end, because that seems to come up. A lot of the issues that I've come across, generally speaking, when you speak to the young people who are troubled in their youth about their background, quite a lot of them come from broken marriages, broken homes, where they've not had a settled life. So when we look at that from your experience and with your knowledge, what would you say is something that we need to be more aware of if we're in those scenarios?
I mean, in reality, it's down to the parents. It's the parents, because the children react to the parents, right? The behaviour that the children are displaying is communicating something to us, and it's down to how they were parented. If someone's parented, with love and respect and all the good stuff, they're not going to have these issues. They're not going to have these hang-ups. The reason they've got these hang-ups is because those things were not given to them. And if they're not given to you by the closest people to you, the people that should protect you, should love you, the message that you're giving that child is that if your own mother doesn't love you, if your own father doesn't love you, no one loves you.
Yeah.
If your own mother doesn't protect you, your father doesn't protect you, guess what? No one's going to protect you. So then they have to, they start developing the self-belief that no one's got their back, right? And the only person who's got their back is themselves. And this is where they'll get themselves into difficulties and troubles and find it difficult to self-regulate. So the primary cause of it is the parents.
Yeah.
And that's when the last couple of years I've been focusing a lot on parenting with a parenting coach at Unity. Sumla, because I do believe that is, if you want to go to the crux of it, that's where it starts,
Yeah.
right? You come into this world, you're completely vulnerable as a baby.
Yeah.
What the mother, primarily what the mother does, but then the father is going to have the most impact on you, more than any relative, more than any teacher, more than anyone. When we do have breakups, marriage breakups, divorces, I always say to people, and I'm dealing with a few right now, I always say to people, okay, you got married, you're an adult, the other person's an adult, you two could not make your marriage work.
Yeah.
Right? That is you, that's you, right? It's got nothing to do with your children.
Yeah.
Your children have done nothing wrong. You both were unable to make your marriage work for whatever reasons. Fine. But why should they pay the price? So you now have to go out your way to ensure that the impact to them is minimal. So do not say to them, "Oh, your dad did this," or "Your mum did that," or your mum didn't love you, that's why she left you, and that's abuse.
Emotional
That's manipulation. It's abuse, and God will hold you to account for that. Right? Children are innocent. They'll leave them like that. They say, "Look, mummy and daddy, we're not living together."
Yep.
You explain it in their own way, but do not bring your stuff into it. Do not use them as a weapon against your spouse. And a lot of people do this. They use their children as a weapon. I dealt with a case. And it's not in Glasgow. It's in England. But in effect, both parents are coming to her, to the daughter, with their problems, their marital problems, and she's like the mediator. So that the daughter's become the mediator between the two parents, right?
And it must be quite common though, Shaykh. It must be quite common in these types of situations where mother and father are getting split up. Children become the sort of in between, and it doesn't always necessarily have to be in a malicious manner. It could just simply be one parent offloading some of their feelings and then the other parent offloading.
That's very dangerous.
You're right. Well, that's what I'm saying. When I'm saying malicious, I mean it doesn't necessarily have to be vicious dialogue. It can simply be a parent putting their emotions onto that child, and as you're saying, that's putting.
If you want to offload, go and speak to a counsellor.
Yeah.
If you want to offload, go and speak to your friends.
Yeah.
If you want to offload, go and speak to someone else. Don't speak to your children, because the child is caught then.
Yeah.
And you're affecting their relationship with the other parent. And then what will happen is if you do that, and they say something to the other parent will say, "Oh no, but she did this as well."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, then you're affecting that child's relationship with the mother. So that's a very dangerous place to do, because it causes a lot of damage.
Yeah.
It causes a lot of damage. So you want to offload. I understand that you're human. Go and offload somewhere else.
So some of the points that we were going to talk about there, sibling rivalries, parent child, they're going to probably get covered in some of the questions that we've had through. So one of the points that I think would be worth having a discussion about just now are when we're looking at two sides of two sides that are in the middle of a dispute, and both sides kind of feeling that they're right. So when we're looking at kind of resolving that type of dispute, where you've got two sides that are of the same sort of stubborn, sticking to their guns, we are not moving. So obviously that's a common thing, and they end up in a deadlock. So I'm again assuming here, but you may have had these kind of scenarios where you've worked with clients who they're not willing to budge, and so I guess, and I'm hoping that people who are listening here, we've been in these scenarios where we're like, do you know what, I know I'm right, you be right, and we're just going to look the other way and just avoid one another. From an Islamic perspective, what is the appropriate way to deal with that type of thing? And I know it's easy to say, you should be the higher, turn the other cheek, be the better person, as they say. Is that as simple as it is?
I think that again is a bit more nuanced. So if you're talking about siblings when they're quite young, you've got to allow them to resolve their own issues, right? Because if you're always, as a parent, refereeing, you're not teaching that vital life skill, because not everybody in life is going to agree with you, and you can't bring your mum and dad to save you every day. You're going to have to learn that skill of how to deal with somebody who is pushing your buttons. So you're teaching them how to stand their ground, you're teaching them how to protect themselves. So that skill, I think, if it's kind of younger children, you need to let them try to resolve their own issues.
Right.
If you're talking about more serious things where families are at each other's throats, where normally this comes down to two things I've seen: either money, so land, business, inheritance. You know, my dad said this, no, my dad said that. He said left it to me, no, he left it to such and such. So those feuds can be avoided. I just did a course in Dundee on a death course, and I added a section on inheritance. And we were discussing this, and I said, look, this can actually be avoided if our older generation were a bit more savvy and realised, you know, something, I'm not going to be around forever. I better get my money in order, money affairs in order, because what happens is they leave it for other people, and then other people end up fighting over it. So I think it's part of it can be, if they're still alive, the elders are still alive, to actually have that discussion as they're alive. That's number one. If it's like family feud, and I don't know, that both sides are saying they're right, well, if they cannot resolve it themselves, bring in a mediator, somebody that both parties respect. And the role of the mediator shouldn't just be to just listen to them, but should actually force them to evidence what they're saying. So say it's money matters. Say, right, okay, what's your evidence for saying that land was given to you? When was this conversation? Where are the witnesses? Where's the documentation, etc., etc. So you can, a lot of these disputes, you can try to make it a bit clearer through evidence. You say, well, what's your evidence? And forcing them rather than just say hearsay. So I think that's probably another way of doing it. So money is one issue. Another issue is kind of, you know, slanderous stories, or gossip. You know, you told such and such about this or whatever. That's a second one. And the third one is where they think that the family members are harming them, like through sihr and things like that. So I mean, all these are real situations, and you're put in those situations to see how you're going to react. Because think about it, if we just all had great parents, great siblings, there's nothing really difficult in life, right? You know, other things are fine. If your home life is wonderful, then there's not really many other things that give you that much stress, right? So part of the test of life is that God puts you in situations, sometimes gives you very difficult relatives to deal with, and that's a test of character for them. If they're oppressive, like how oppressive will they be? Are they digging, because they're digging themselves at home. It's like you keep going, you're basically digging yourself a hole. And then you have other people who, with that difficult scenario, can they be patient? Can they overlook things? Can they, you know, let things go? And the thing is, if you let things go for the peace, you know, to bring people together, it's always a win-win situation. There's a hadith that says the person leaves an argument when they're in the wrong, they get a house in paradise in the periphery, and if they leave the argument when they're in the right, they get it, you know, within paradise. So leaving that argumentation because you think this is not worth it, it's not worth souring relations and all the rest of it for, I don't know, $2,000 or whatever it is, right? You know, you come to some sort of agreement. Maybe you lost a little bit, but that recompense in the next life will be much greater.
And that's something that I think, you know, you need to have that awareness of what your next stage of, you know, after we leave this don't know what it is, because that's ultimately what you should be fixated on. And if, as you've said there, you know, it's there that if you're going to walk away from this dispute and you believe you're in the right and you are in the right, there's a greater benefit, there's a greater reward for you. But I think we tend to get kind of caught up in the dunya a wee bit. We tend to think, no, I'm gonna take that time to kind of work through this.
People spend years and years and
Yeah.
wasting
Couple
years of their
decades.
lives, years of their lives wasting it on this kind of stuff. I mean, there's a hadith that says that to reconcile between two people is better than praying, fasting, giving sadaqah, nothing, the extra. So extra fasting, extra prayers, extra, and obviously sadaqah is extra anyway, is better than that. It's higher reward.
Wow.
You know, there's a really good scene in one of the Turkish dramas. It's called Yunus Emre. It's really good, and I love the scene. So basically, the spiritual leader, the Shaykh, right? They call him in for a dispute. So it's two brothers. One brother is saying, well, I left this land, so it's my land, I want it back.
Yeah.
The other brother's saying, well, he's been away for 20 years, I've been looking after the land, and had I not looked after the land, it would be worthless. So I mean, all that hard work, where's my recompense? So the Shaykh is listening to this, and he's kind of inclined to think, well, that guy's got a point.
Yeah.
That technically, yes, it's his, but really, he's the one that's looked after it for all this time, and you really should give him something. So he's trying to convince the guy who owns it, to relent, but he won't relent. No, it's mine, it's mine. Because let me ask you a question. Whose land was this before you? He goes, my dad's. And he goes, and whose land was it before that? He goes, his dad's. And he goes, and before that, he goes, his dad's. And he goes, okay, so who are you going to leave this land to? He goes, my children. He goes, and who will they leave that land? He goes, to their children. So he goes, do you really own it? You're just looking after it to give it to the next guy. And I thought, when I remember that scene, I just thought, if we looked at the world like that,
Absolutely.
the dunya, right, we're in this cafe,
Yeah.
right? Whoever set it up, one day it's going to be gone.
Yeah.
It's going to move on to the next people, the next generation. A lot of us are in homes
Yeah.
who are not bought by us.
Yeah.
My family home was bought by my father. He's not here anymore. And then it will get passed on to the next person. You're just passing on.
Yeah.
You're holding these worldly possessions for a short period, then you're giving on to someone else.
Yeah.
And if you hold on to it and you don't spend it, when you die, it will go into your inheritors.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. So we've briefly touched on a few, and as I said to anyone who's watching here, when we go to the Q&A section, there are a couple of questions here that I think would be pretty relevant for the audience that are tuning in today. But the next part, and again this does link to one of the questions, somebody asked the question, are there any scenarios where it is permissible to distance yourself, to not mend ties with family members? You earlier touched on someone who's maybe been the victim of abuse, physical abuse. There may be other kind of scenarios where there's been a lot of trauma there. So is there permissibility in severing ties with family?
There's always exceptions to every rule. So, for example, I even read that if for example you're close to a family, but they're engaged in some sort of haram activity, right? Let's say they run casinos,
Right.
and you give them that, well, listen, you shouldn't do this, right? I don't want to eat food from your house because it's haram money, and they just kind of they won't listen. You're allowed to distance yourself with the intention that it's to send a message.
Okay.
Right? I actually know people who used to sell alcohol, and their relatives, a number of them just pulled away and said, we don't want anything to do with you because of the alcohol, and actually forced them to give up that business. So it can work. So there are obviously exceptions to this. And then, like I said to you, there are people who have been severely traumatized, and you can't treat them the normal way because it might not be possible for them. It might be just too much mental stress for them. Things like sexual abuse cases are obviously exceptions as well, because seeing that person may trigger them. Right? So you can't expect them to be going over to their families and all the rest of it. So there are kind of cases where you're allowed to distance yourself. What they tend to say is the bare minimum is to exchange salams.
Okay.
So you see somebody at a funeral, you see somebody at a wedding, Assalamu alaikum, how are you? That's it. You know, you're still maintaining some semblance of family ties. You've not completely severed. So in that situation, it would be that you see them and you just ignore them, right? That would be severing ties. But if when you do see them, you give them salams, but you keep your distance. That's okay. That's permissible.
Yeah.
If you just see them on Eid or just send them a message on Eid, So I think every situation is different.
Yeah.
So if I was talking to somebody and they said, "Look, I'm just traumatized. My parents beat me up and did this to me and did this to me and did this to me, and all sorts of injustices, and I'm still carrying that stuff and I'm working with a counsellor or whatever." You can't expect that person to be play happy families, right? That wouldn't be just. So depending on the severity of the situation, but what you can do is pull back. You don't have to be going over every week, right? You can pull back and go less often, or pull back and just keep touch through WhatsApp or Eid or whatever, things like that.
And is that specific to the position of that family member? So, and I get it, you're right. If we're looking at the kind of gravity of the situation, if we put the abuse side right up at that end, and then the lower end of the spectrum, kind of more pettier kind of disputes, I'm assuming that that's irrespective of who that family member is, whether it's a parent, whether it's a third cousin, it doesn't matter. You still have the right, depending on the gravity of that kind of dispute, abuse, whatever it might be, you're still allowed to step back from that. Is that?
Yeah, because, I mean, as you know, and there's plenty of cases in the news, even parents can be very abusive. Sometimes children are killed through neglect.
Yeah, we saw that.
Children are abused, all sorts of things are done to them by malicious parents. So that does exist. It's not as if it doesn't exist. There are situations where parents will manipulate and use guilt. I mean, I know a case of this is in America, and ladies like a doctor, right? So it's a professional.
Yeah.
But it's very clear from talking to her, and she talks about her children and what happened. And the mother's got this hold, this kind of control, and basically throws a tantrum. And she throws a tantrum and basically says, God won't forgive you unless you obey me. That kind of uses that kind of tactic, and that's affected her and it's affected her marriage. So every situation is different. A person is allowed to protect themselves, but at the same time, the hesitancy is that sometimes people will exaggerate. The parents actually being not that bad, but in their mind it's extremely it's extremely bad. Let me just 1 second. Yes.
This is how relaxed and genuine this live stream is. Shaykh's getting calls, but it's all good. It's fine. Sorry, you were saying?
That's to do with somebody's divorce case. That's why the person's calling me.
Told you was the right person to have this discussion with. So Shaykh, let's have a look at. I mean, a lot of people who are watching this potentially will be watching this. We'll be looking for those practical tips that we can take away, that we can implement in our everyday life. The mindset obviously seems like a big one, because we're talking about being aware, reflecting on ourselves, how we're going to be held to account. You've talked about how you'll be accountable in your grave for how you've treated your family before anything else. So this all kind of circles back to that kind of mindset of irrespective. And again, we're not talking about the extreme cases. We're talking about the kind of day-to-day, he said, she said, he took, what kind of, pettier, more kind of topics. It sounds like a lot of that we need to ask ourselves. So when it comes to being questioned in our own graves, we'll be accountable for how we reacted, how we responded, not for what the other person's is. Am I right in saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not say you were okay because they did that to you, so you're okay to swear at them or to talk back bad to them or to whatever it might be? am I right in saying that's not the case? Obviously, from my perspective, I'm thinking, whatever it is, you know, we often hear stories of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and how, you know, when he was approached or greeted with hostility or anger or abuse, he always came from a position of peace first. You know, it was always, you know, salam first. It was always coming with peace before, and it sounds like that's the first kind of thing, is the mindset. But are there any practical tips you can give people who are out there just now saying, I've not spoken to that Carla, or I've not spoken to that Jaja, or I've not spoken to such and such of my cousins because, you know, we fell out a year ago or 12 months ago, whatever it might be, and I just can't, I'm not bothered, forget it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you reminded me when you were saying salama. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَإِذَا خَاطَبُهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. If the ignoramuses or the ignorant address them, they say peace. In other words, you don't get into arguments with ignorant people, right? And this is, you know, social media, there's so many, you know, trolls that they're just wasting your time. You don't entertain that. So you have to also always think of the person you're actually dealing with. Are they actually, you know, like, I remember when my father passed away, a major event obviously, and one of my kind of, not close relatives, but, you know, extended family came over, and this is, remember, the days of condolences.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there, and he comes up to me and goes, "So, how's Syria?" So I just got back from Syria about 6 weeks ago, and I was like, "It's fine." And he was asking me about, and I'm like, "I don't want to talk about what I was doing there." I'm like,
"Yeah, grieving, yeah."
Grieving, right? And I said, "Look, I don't think it's the right time." And he goes, "I know, but these things happen." The death, that's what he's referring to. And I remember I got so vexed at that point, right? And I turned around to my cousin, because that's his brother-in-law, and said, "Listen, you need to work with him, right? Because that's not appropriate. That's not on, right?" Anyway, I was talking to my sister afterwards, and I was really annoyed and angry. And I remember she said to me, she goes, "But that's his level of intellect.
Yeah.
Like, that's how daft he is, right? That he doesn't even realise that it's an inappropriate thing to say." And when she said that, I thought, "You're right, you know that. You're absolutely right, that I'm getting annoyed. But if he knew better, he wouldn't do that."
Yeah, yeah.
So you're dealing with somebody who doesn't know any better. Yes, he shouldn't do it, but that's what that's what you do. If you're, you know, if you're on the street and a junkie comes, "Hey, what are you doing?" and throws some racial slurs at you, you don't take it seriously, because it's like, the guy's drunk, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't know what he's doing, right? You don't take it to heart and go home and feel really hurt about it, because you know the person you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So sometimes you've got to look at the relative and say, is he just a bit daft, right? And says daft things anyway to everyone, right? You got to deal with him at that level. So the first thing is, like, actually, is this, like you said, is a person doing it maliciously? Because they might be doing the wrong thing, but it's not malicious. It's just that they don't know any better, or they're just not switched on, or they, you know, whatever it is, ill-informed. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is the petty stuff, right? You've got to realise that petty stuff, and you don't want to be petty. You know, you don't want to waste your life being in squabbles and pettiness, because there's always going to be somebody that says something about you, right? And you're just going to keep getting upset. I mean, last couple of weeks, there's those things that people have told me things that they've said, that I've said, and I haven't said them, and they know it. They've attributed things to me I've not said, right? Guy was apologising because he said, you know, I divorced my wife, and she said, "Look, it's serious, you need to speak to someone." And he went back to her and spoke to me, and he said it's okay. And I didn't have that conversation. And this was years ago, and then he's saying to me, "Look, I apologise about that." So, you know, now am I going to get upset about that? I've got every right to be upset. But you're going to stop it. You're going to stop the next person. You're never going to be able to stop people. There will be always people who will make up things, who will spread lies, who will exaggerate, who will gossip, who will, you know, like to get into squabbles. and so you have to weigh up whether it's even worth it. And the thing is, not everybody. I think it's a really important point. Somebody got this, said this to me, and it really made my life a lot easier. As he said that not everybody's words should mean something to you. In other words, think about who are the people in your life whose words you actually value. And when you actually think about it, then you realise it's actually very few people. There's only a few people in your life who their words are actually very weighty because they know you on a deep level. A lot of other people, right, who say stuff about you, they don't really know you. Right? So their value of their words is, it's not really, I mean, it's hurtful, but when you think about it, you're actually, the problem is you're giving it too much value. You're giving it more value than it's actually worth. You've got to treat it like that junkie. That look, okay, guy's drunk, or this guy's an ignorant person, or this guy's whatever he is, or this person doesn't know me, or this person has got the wrong end of the stick, or has been listening to other people about me, whatever it is, right? And just let it go. So what if they hold that opinion or don't hold that opinion? It makes no difference to your life.
One of the things I try and do, Shaykh, is I kind of try and give people the benefit of the doubt, and often, actually, if I hear people who may be, criticising me, or the people, as you said, people are going to always have something to say. More often when you're public facing and out there, and people always have things that they want to say, but quite often, I generally try to think to myself that, give them the benefit of the doubt. You don't know, don't know what they're dealing with at home. Quite often, you might find that their comments and their criticisms are coming because of unhappiness at home in their own lives. They're jealous. There's envy. There's sadness in their own life, and therefore, talking about someone gives them that. The shaitan will feed on that and let them get a bit of a rise out of that.
It says more about them than it does about you. It's what they're experiencing, what they're going through. Number one. Number two, and I know this from experience because I've dealt with so many cases, is that when people say, "Oh, this was said about you," or "that was said about," I take it with a pinch of salt. Because so many times when you've gone back, it's not exactly what they're saying. So either they're relaying half the message, or some of it, or 80%, or 90%. 10%'s got missed, or words got missed here, words got missed there. So I'm very hesitant. When people say such and such was saying this about you.
All the while you're getting worked up.
Because you don't even know if it is it really that's how they said it, or is that how you've picked it up.
True.
So I think that when you take a more cautious approach, like, okay, let me just wait and see, let me just verify this first, you'll save yourself a lot of headache. I think what happens is we jump the gun. We're too quick to believe people. And take their word that whatever they said is 100% true.
That's true.
Right. So I know that, okay, this relative in the past has told me a lie, for example. So it'd be very, very silly of me to believe everything they say after that. I've got to go with the evidence. The evidence is this person's lied to me before, they could lie to me again. So listen to them like, okay, let me just double check that, because I'm not sure. So this is the thing, like there's a hadith, the believer's not stung from the same place twice. So I think that's another issue, that there's a conflation with forgiveness, and people don't understand forgiveness properly. Forgiveness doesn't mean
forget. They say forgive and forget.
You forgive and forget in one sense, and you don't forgive and forget in another sense. The way you forgive and don't forget is that, okay, this guy defrauded me. I will never engage with this person with money ever again. Right? So I don't forget what he's done. Because he's done this to me before, he could do it again. Even though he's turned a leaf and maybe he's mashallah, right? But I don't know. If he's done it once, he could do it again. So you don't forget that. What you do forget when you're forgiving, you let go of the hurt. You get let go of the fact that this person hurt you, and you don't wish for them to be held accountable in the next life. So you forget that part, but you don't forget the fact that the person lied, or that the person betrayed your trust, or that the person defrauded you. That thing makes you cautious.
You've learned from that.
You learn from it, right? Otherwise you would remain naive.
Of course.
You remain naive, and this is the problem we have in the community, is that they say, oh, the person's in Tawbah, they're a new person now. And you're like, yeah, they're in Tawbah, I'll accept it. But
Doesn't mean you go in blind again.
yeah, if the guy had a problem with alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
right, you don't put him next to alcohol again.
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
So maybe he's done tawbah, that's fine. But if he's got a history of grievous bodily harm,
Yeah.
don't put him in situations where that might occur.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so whatever, because human beings are weak.
Yeah. Of
We're
course.
weak. You know, so if the person's got a particular issue, you know that relative
Yeah.
has got a short fuse, right? There's no point getting into silly arguments because you know that they're not going to let it go. They're just going to get worked up and do something daft. So then you're just provoking the person because you know what they're like.
See, a leopard never changes the spots.
Yeah,
So something like that. Anyway, we're coming close to the end of the live, and that takes us on to the Q&A section before we wrap up. And so I will turn to the questions that I've got here just now, some of which we've already answered. So the first one was any scenarios whereby you're permitted to not forgive a family member, and obviously Sheikh's already touched on those, kind of depending on the severity of the dispute. There is permissibility there to stay away from that, to protect yourself. The second one was lots of disputes come from people within families stirring things up or gossiping. What advice can you give to those of us who are stuck in such families? So if they know, if you're in a family where, you know, they're saying here people are stirring things up or gossiping, if you're an observer to that perhaps, or maybe it's your family, or maybe you're a part of that.
Yeah, so you try your best. So let's just say it's a gossip situation, right? And it's getting, you know, it's making things worse. You can maybe step in and say, all right, so why did they do that? So basically you get the people thinking. They say, oh, you know, he did this, did this. And you say, oh, okay, why did you do that? I don't know, he's just, you know. No, but people don't do things for no reason. There must have been a reason. What's the reason? So you get them thinking, well, hold on a second, why did he do that? Right? So I think that's one. The other thing is if it's just like backbiting, like, you know, putting people down for no reason, you can change the conversation. So you say, you know, oh, yeah, and just take it off in a different direction. So you can do all these kind of different tactics and techniques. But if they just insist, you say, you know, oh, I need to go.
So
you know,
remove yourself.
Yeah, you remove yourself from the situation. I need to head. You know, something's happened, or someone's called, or I need to get going.
Right.
Or I need to go and do something.
So in the first scenario, you try and, you know, change the situation topic, or try and deviate the conversation to something else to protect the, you know, everyone that are in the room. But if everyone's kind of fixed on that topic, then you should, you know, you can use that as your time to
Yeah, I'd say the first thing is, see, look, they're creating a problem, right? So your intention is how to diffuse that problem, and the way you diffuse it is you start asking questions, right? Intelligent questions like, well, why did they do that? Right? And then if they start saying, well, you know, it's because they had an art last week, he got divorced or something. You say, well, guy got divorced, maybe he's not in the right frame. You know, so then you bring context.
Yeah, I understand.
And then that just diffuse, and everyone's like, yeah, I'm being a bit stupid here.
So
you know,
add a different perspective to the conversation first to kind of almost change it from almost backbiting, gossiping to a discussion about.
I think view it as like you're trying to make people think.
Yeah, right.
You're trying to make people think, right? And even though they might still do it, but they might think, well, you know, I can understand why you do that. Guy's going through a hard time, you know. So him kicking off with that person, still wrong, but I can get why it happened, you know. So you're getting them to actually become more merciful, because they're starting to see that other person through a more merciful lens. That, okay, the person's human, he made a mistake. So that's the first approach. If that's not working, like I said, you try and change the topic to something else, and then the last stage is you just, if it's just not going anywhere, you remove yourself from that conversation.
Yes. Interesting. Okay, so the next one we've got here.
Can I just I remembered a joke.
Okay, go for it. Yeah, we're not in a studio. Go for it.
So this is for the Punjabis. You need to know Punjabi for this. So they say that you always know a Punjabi because after 3 hours of gossiping, they say less than Nokia.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sure I've got relatives out there that probably do stuff like that.
What's it got to do with us?
What's it got to do with us? Yeah. What's it to do with us? Yeah. There we go. Anybody who's listening, don't take any offence to that. It was a
Yeah.
joke. Okay, next one is sometimes you feel your elders are in the wrong and not being fair. How can you tackle such situations without being disrespectful? Because you don't want to hurt them in any way, but also you don't want. Also, you want to save yourself from being hurt. So, this is one that's come up a couple of times actually. You know, correcting elders, and I remember there was a young guy that had a chat with me probably about a year ago, and he asked that same question. Father or mother, whoever it was, you know, saying wrong, doing wrong, whatever it is. As the son, do I have a right to call my parent out? You know, how do I navigate through that?
I think the first thing is we're assuming that the elders are wrong because it could be right. So I think we have to be careful we're not arrogant. That no, I know I'm right and they're wrong. So that's the first thing. Always try to see it from their perspective. Put yourself in their shoes. So let's just say it's a clear-cut wrong thing, right? Everyone and the granny would know it's a wrong thing. In that kind of situation, again, you have to look at the person in front of you. What kind of elder is he? You know, is it the type of elder you can actually talk to and be and he's quite reasonable, or is the kind of person that gets angry?
Yeah.
So I think if you're dealing with a kind of more difficult kind of elder, you have to first of all give them their due. So for example, you say, if they're saying something right, you say, of course uncle, you know, you've got more life experience, you've seen these things, you're obviously your perspective is, you know, is based on something, and you know, so you basically praise them or give them their due, that you know, yep, I get it, you know, I can see what you're saying, etc., etc. But then just say, however, I'm looking at it like this. So you don't just say, listen, you're wrong. This is no. You give them their due. Because when you validate them, they think, okay, I'm getting respected here. This younger person is respecting me. Okay, then they're more likely to listen to you. You say, but uncle, I see it slightly differently. I see it like this, and this is my reasons for it. You back up your situation with evidence. This is my evidence for it. Then it makes it very difficult for them to just say you're talking nonsense. Right? Number one. And number two is, young people need to understand that, you know, as an expression is that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Older people are set in their ways. They're more rigid, right? Physically they become more rigid. You know, your body becomes more rigid. It's not as flexible. It's the same thing. They become more rigid, and you've got to work with the person that you've got. And if you need to disagree, you do it in the best possible way. And if they're still not budging, just to say, look, uncle, I totally respect what you're saying. I think your points are valid, but I'm seeing it slightly differently. So I'm going to be doing it like this. I hope you don't take offence. You see, there's ways of doing things. You don't need to be hot-headed and get into big arguments.
So you need to maintain that respect.
So you respectfully disagree, but hold your ground.
So it's not wrong to disagree,
No.
but it's the delivery of your message, the delivery of your sort of perspective that you're giving to that person. That's where you have to be respectful and maintain that
Just give them their due. Most elders, if you give them their due, they're more okay then with you disagreeing with them.
Okay, interesting. I'm going to see if I can get some questions off of the live here. These are ones that were submitted before, but I've got another one here. So this is one many of us might have heard growing up. I was told that I'm not allowed to stay angry at someone for more than 3 days. Where did that come from?
There's a hadith that says it's not becoming of a Muslim to be angry with his brother for more than 3 days. So the idea is that you're not supposed to be in long term disputes because it's not good for society. So okay, you're initially got a problem, but when things calm down you need to kind of resolve it. But like I said, there are exceptions to that, like that one I was saying to you. If they're doing something wrong, you're allowed to not speak to them more than 3 days. If by doing that you think you can put pressure on them to do the right thing, I'll give an example of that. Like they're involved in gambling or something, or alcohol or something. So there's always exceptions. That's a general rule. As a general rule, somebody who you've had an argument with the other.
Yeah.
After 3 days, you should like try and resolve it.
Okay. So that's where that came from for whoever was asking that one. Next one is, my cousins haven't spoken in years and it's driven a wedge between their family and made it awkward for the rest of us when we are at family events. Both of them are stubborn, both of them think they are right and won't back down. How can we as the family help them fix things between them?
So,
Coming back to that mediation thing again, is that?
I think the thing is, okay, those two people have a dispute. That's their problem.
Yeah.
What's it got to do with you?
Yeah, I think
So-
this
so
person's
the-
saying it's making it awkward at family events and when the family are together because there's two cousins who are perhaps.
Yeah, but the thing is, I'm saying they're both awkward
Yeah.
with each other.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to be awkward.
Yeah.
So the rest, say there's 10 people, there's 10 cousins, and two
Yeah.
of them don't get on.
Mm-hmm.
The other 8 can get on,
Yeah.
right, and get on and have a laugh and interact with each of them, right? So what I'm saying is that don't allow their awkwardness to spread and make everybody awkward. You want to make your
Yeah.
cohesiveness
Yeah.
affect them.
So there's not an onus on the people outside of that conflict to try and go in and try and resolve it.
Not that you should resolve it, because I remember I mentioned the thing about reconciling. But it's about understanding these two people, their natures. What's the best possible way of reconciling? Some people you can sit them down,
Yeah. Yeah.
and this has been going on for a long time, so they're like entrenched. So what possibly you can do, in fact, there's a hadith that says lying is permissible in 3 situations. Guess what? One of the situations is to reconcile between 2 parties. So you can actually go to cousin 1 and say, by the way,
He said sorry.
yeah. No, well, I was with cousin 2,
Yeah.
and he really misses you. He really he was talking about you. So cousin 2 could be like cursing the guy,
Yeah.
but you go and say to me, he's talking about you.
Yeah.
So you don't say he's cursing you, you say he's talking about you.
Yeah.
So you put a spin on it,
Ah, right. Okay.
right? You put a positive spin on it, and then you go back and it's really, you were saying this or you saying that. Then you go to cousin 1. By the way, I was with cousin
He was
2,
asking about you.
and he was asking about you. So
Yeah.
you start to bring.
Yeah.
So they're over here. You're starting to build that connection slowly. So this requires a bit of wisdom. So there's 2 cousins that have fallen out. There's 10 of you. There's eight brains between you. Put your 8 brains together
And figure it out.
how you're going to bring these 2 people together.
Interesting. Hopefully that provided some practical tips for whoever that was that mentioned that. These 2 came in later on in the day through somebody else. How to deal with a toxic parent when you know you can't change them. So you'd already briefly touched on that. I don't think we need to go into too much more depth on that. We know that,
I think all I would say there is, look, that relationship is a bit unique because of the emphasis that the Quran and the Sunnah put on being good to parents. However, that doesn't mean that you allow the parent to abuse you. So if they're, again, we're just assuming that this person's correct.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. So
Yeah.
I'm not. If I sat with them, I might say, well, actually, your parents not that bad.
Yeah.
Right? But let's just assume they are a toxic person, right? They're just a problematic person. So you're allowed to then distance yourself, but you maintain a kind of minimal contact, a minimal contact in a way which you can safeguard yourself. So if it's like one person, if a phone just like has a go at me, just like on and on and on, I can't take it, and I just have a meltdown afterwards. If it's that kind of level, then send a voice note. Send a message. So there's other ways of communicating and keeping in touch, if that's just too much for you. So you can take it, you can distance yourself and do things differently in a way that you maintain your relationship, but you're protecting yourself. So say they say they send a nasty voice note back, you don't need to listen to it. If it's like really upsetting you and it's like you're having a meltdown listening to it,
pause it. You have the option
just
to
pause
stop
it. So there's mechanisms of dealing with it better.
Okay. And the last one from here, and then I'll jump over because I can see some people are messaging in the live there. how to navigate relationships with your first cousins if your parents don't talk to their parents anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very similar to what you touched on before.
Yeah, they don't get on. That's up to them.
Yeah, yeah,
But there's no reason why. And the thing is, you know, you can just be with your cousins. Look, I know this is a bit awkward, so our parents don't talk right, but that's between them. It's like if a husband and wife, the parents, right, they've got a problem, right. That doesn't mean the children should talk to each other. You continue your relationship. So, you know, if the parents are not talking to each other, they've got their own reasons or whatever. It's nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
If you see your cousin, speak to your cousin. Just don't talk about that thing if it's awkward or whatever. And maybe at some point you might be able to say, look, can we do something to get our parents talking again?
Yeah.
What do you think? You know, maybe you can figure out a way of actually getting them to
Trying
talk
to do
again.
that.
And that'd be a huge service to your family, and it's a massive reward if you're able to do it.
Yeah. Right, I'm going to see if I can tap into some of these live comments here, but it's going to mean that I need to nip over to the device here. So let's have a look and see. So, what do you do with an uncle and auntie who have stopped talking to one another because their kids were married and the marriage ended in divorce?
That's a difficult one. Look, it depends if the uncle. It depends on how closely related they are. If they're not really, I'm assuming like they married like cousins. It's like cousins that got married or something like that. So it's like a family. It's like a family kind of thing. The thing is, look, those two people could not get on, right?
Yeah.
The reality and truth of that only God knows, because we don't know the truth. We weren't there. We can only go by what they're saying, right? So I think that we can just say to them that, look, uncle, I know your heart. I know, you know, again, validating them and then just saying, look, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't speak to your sister, for example.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that's important that you don't break family ties. And again, the uncle and auntie, they don't have to be best mates, but they can at least be amicable.
Yeah.
Give each other salams, you know. Not going to harm you on Eid if you send a message.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know. So I think that all you can do is advise people. If people don't want to listen to advice, that's their prerogative.
We'll take another two questions, just I'm conscious of time here, and inshallah we'll try and get some offline, but there's one there. Salam, is it permissible if I choose not to engage in any conversation with non-mahram men, even if they are in my close family, e.g. brother-in-laws and first cousins?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to engage in conversations. You can just say salam, hope you're all well, you know, that's it, and then leave, go to the next room. There's nothing wrong with that. Or you know, if they come, you know, you open the door. You don't just open the door and look at them and just walk away. You say assalamu alaikum, come inside, and that's it. Very minimal. You can have very minimal conversation. That's not really a conversation. That's just like being hospitable.
Yeah. There's one there that we were asked about permissibility of or expected to cut ties with family members of the other gender, i.e. cousins, brother-in-law. We've already spoken about that. Is there anything further up? I know that Unity Family Services have kindly offered to take some of the questions offline through email, so more than happy for people to do that. I think we can wrap it up there rather than trying to scroll any further back. I'll move this live over here, we'll leave it towards Shaykh Amer. But yes, just before we wrap up then, hopefully it's been beneficial for those who have tuned in tonight. As I said, we've tried a slightly different kind of feeling and vibe, more conversational, and maybe inshallah if the feedback that we receive from you guys who are watching is that it's been quite a nice kind of setting and way of holding this discussion, and inshallah we can maybe pick up ones in the future. I'd like to thank Shaykh Amer for his valuable time and wisdom on this topic. I'd also like to thank again our Mosque Coffee House team for keeping the space open and allowing us to use their place for this. And also in terms of resources, please Unity Family Services, they are there. You can see them in the live just now, taking questions. Please follow their page if you require any assistance with any of these types of family matters. You can contact them and they'll be able to help. And just a final kind of reminder from yourself, Shaykh, and maybe a dua just to finish, inshallah.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, we, just as human beings, not even as Muslims, just as human beings, relationships are difficult sometimes to maintain. You are going to have that relative that's you just don't get on with. You're going to have difficult people in your families, and these are tests for us. It's a test of our character. Are we going to be able to deal with those people or not? The Prophet ﷺ, did he like everybody he dealt with? No, he had to deal with everyone. And that's the thing with relations, is that sometimes God puts difficulties in our path to see how we're going to behave, how we're going to react to that, and all of it ultimately is a test. It's a test of our character. So we have to bear that in mind, that that's just part of life. And you know, not all relatives are going to be singing your praises. Look at the Prophet; he was the best of all people, yet he couldn't get those. He had 4 uncles at the time. Hamza becomes Muslim not straight away. He dies in Uhud. His other uncle Abbas actually became Muslim very late on. So after a long period, actually, and then Abu Talib, his uncle, doesn't become Muslim. Abu Lahab becomes his enemy. These are the closest people to the Prophet. You know, so if that's a Prophet with the ultimately best of character, what about people like us? And we, you know, I say things are wrong, wrong things. You know, I make mistakes all the time. I sometimes say things I shouldn't have said. So the same way we want people to be forgiving to us and overlook our mistakes, we've got to, you know, also stretch the hand out to our relatives as well. They will say the wrong thing. They will sometimes, you know, get it wrong. As human, and we've got to be able to forgive and move beyond that. And the thing is, it's in everyone's interest. You know, when you get married, right, it's in your interest to get on with your in-laws. It will make your life so much easier. It is in your interest to get along with your relatives, even the ones that you don't like, right? But to be on amicable terms, because nobody needs enmity, nobody needs stress, right? The more you can make your relationships work, the easier your life is going to be. So even from a purely selfish perspective, it makes sense to get on with your relatives and your family, because it will make your life easier. And when those relationships are strained, it affects every aspect of your life. So I think that, and also we kind of know the emphasis that our religion puts on maintaining family ties, and I'll end with a hadith that says that the one who maintains al-wasil laysa bi mukafi, which basically means the one who maintains family ties is not the one who is because his relatives have been good to him. The one who maintains family ties is when his relatives are bad to him, but he keeps going back and back and back. And a man comes to the Prophet ﷺ and says, you know, I'm good to my relatives, they're bad to me. And he says, keep being good to them, because God will help you and God will reward you. So we'll end on that note, inshallah.
Okay, we'll finish up there, and please do give us your feedback on the session and how you felt that it went, and inshallah we may catch you on the next one. Open to any suggestions. If anyone has any specific topics that you feel would be of benefit, please do reach out to us and let us know. But we'll leave it there. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.